Hey everyone, let's look at the Chevy Equinox EV today. I've been driving this thing around for a couple of days and I really like it. This is what the key looks like. And this is the RS trim. So there is a more base LT trim and there is a RS trim, which is a bit more sporty, bigger wheels, badging and interior upgrades. And there's also many optional packages you can put on top. So with this RS trim, as we walk up to the car, you're gonna see that these door handles pop out by themselves. So these are like arrow kind of door handles, kind of like Tesla, but these are automatic. So that's really cool. So just pull and then that opens. You can see the doors and even the proportions of this car are actually quite big for what it is. It's about like 2 or 3 inches bigger than the Tesla Model Y in pretty much every dimension, including wheelbase. You can see these wheels, the axles are very far apart. That actually gives it a really nice, stable ride on the highway. It seems really well planted. And the wheels are also like just really big in diameter. So you can see these ones have like 6 lug nuts as opposed to 5. These specific ones are actually 21-inch wheels. And they're kind of comically large because these are 275 millimeters wide. So these are really wide tires. So for better aero, you probably want to go for the 19-inch base wheels. They have less air exposed here. And they're also narrower. I think those are 245s. That's going to give you better efficiency. So the wheels are attractive, but I think I would probably go for smaller wheels for comfort, cheaper replacement tires, and so forth. The Chargeport, while we're here, it's a manual door. This is a CCS car. This is actually a 2024. There's since been a 2025, and 2026s are going to be produced I think later this summer, and there's going to be a NACS port for native supercharger access. This of course is a CCS car. We've tried charging it a couple of times. Some interesting things about charging this car is that it is compatible with Tesla superchargers with an adapter. I've tried that already, and I got the claimed peak of 150 kilowatts, which is 150 kilowatts charging in 2025 is not like great, but it does hold the curve pretty well. We were charging this thing on our test yesterday. It's going to be a separate video, our 10% 15-minute charging stop test. And it did well at a Tesla supercharger. We hit 150 kilowatts and it stayed pretty flat until I want to say 36%, and then it began to throttle down to like 120 something kilowatts. So I think it's perfectly usable. However, let's talk battery. So you get, for the value, for the money, you get a big battery, 85 kilowatt hour battery, which is bigger than a Tesla Model Y, which is more expensive. That part is great. So you get like a pretty big initial range, but the voltage of this pack is lower than most other cars in this class. It's about 288 volts nominal, and that's pretty low. So for example, in my Tesla, when it's fully charged, it's around 400 volts. And when it's like 0%, it's still in the low 300 volts range. So by having a 288 volt battery, you're basically relying on pumping more amps, more current to get the same performance, whether you're charging or whether you're mashing the throttle and accelerating. That's why for this car, if you take it to a standard 150 kilowatt charger, you would think, okay, 150 kilowatt charger, 150 kilowatt capable car, they're gonna work together really well. What ends up happening is that you're actually probably going to be charging at around 100 kilowatts, because if you multiply that low voltage by around 350 amps that those chargers can provide, you only get about 100 kilowatts, because of course power in kilowatts is amps times volts. So that's the disadvantage of a lower voltage architecture of this car. However, with a V3 supercharger from Tesla, those chargers can deliver like 500, 600 amps, no problem. So that was the best charging session I got on this car, is at a Tesla supercharger. But I'll insert a clip into this video. The placement of this charge port is not ideal because it's in the front. Of course, ideally, it would be right here, because Tesla supercharger cables are usually pretty short, especially V3s. V4s are better, but still most superchargers you're going to see are V3s and the cables are short. and you kind of really want to back into the space and plug it in here. But I guess for cost savings, Chevy put all of their electronics in the front, so it would be more cost to route the port all the way to the back. So for that reason, the port is here. And when I was connecting my adapter and then the charging cable from the supercharger, this door is not helping because it's big and it's in the way. So, and I had like maybe like an inch of clearance on this side, and the cable was stretched like right to the limit. Like I had like maybe an inch more if I had moved. Like it was a two-person job to put the car to the charger and then to plug it in. It was a bit stressful, so maybe in this case it would make sense if the charge port was here, kind of like on the Hyundai Kona, like we looked at earlier this month. That would make it certainly a lot easier for supercharger access, but it is what it is. It works, but it's just something to keep in mind of. In terms of motors and power, this here is a front wheel drive car. So one motor in the front axle. The 2024 that we're driving here has a 150 kilowatt motor, which is only about 200 horsepower, which is good for around town driving, but on the highway, if you mash the accelerator pedal, sometimes you can't even tell that you're accelerating. There is, of course, with every trim, the LT and the RS, you can pay a little bit more. I think it's like a $3,000 to $4,000 upgrade, depending if you're in Canada or United States, where there is a secondary motor on the rear axle for the all-wheel drive system. But it is a small motor, so there's a permanent magnet motor in the front. So it's basically a front-wheel drive car most of the time, unless you need the extra power. The all-wheel drive will kick in on the rear axle with a smaller, I think 60 to 64 kilowatt induction motor, and that's on only when you need it. Not like usually it's mostly front-wheel drive. And I have to say that if I was going to buy this car, I might seriously consider the all-wheel drive car. Not so much for the added traction, but for highway passing, like I think it would really benefit from that additional kind of 100 horsepower or so. 2025s though, there was maybe they listened to the initial complaints. The 2025 Equinox EVs have a slight power bump. So from 150 kilowatts, the front goes to 164. So now it's 220 horsepower. I would probably still urge people to go for the upgraded all-wheel drive. And for the all-wheel drive 2025s, I think there's now a total of 300 horsepower. So they added a couple of kilowatts to both. And it's also interestingly slightly more range on the 2025s than the 2024s. It might be maybe a really minor optimization, or maybe it's a change of how they were tested. But range is really impressive. So even the base trims, all of them have the 85 kilowatt hour battery. Really awesome. And Chevy sells it as the cheapest car with a 300 mile or 500 kilometer range. And I have to say, like, just driving it around town when it's kind of most efficient, I think you can realistically hit those numbers. On the highway, in our 10% 15-minute charge stop test, we averaged 4.2 kilometers per kilowatt hour, which calculates to 238 watt hours per kilometer. And if I take the capacity of this pack and then I multiply it by that highway consumption, it's something like 57 kilometers of highway range, 100 to 0. And I think that's pretty good. And this is with these thirsty giant wheels over here. I really think that if you get for the kind of the base 19-inch wheels, you're gonna get even better numbers, like 5 to 8%, I think is very much possible. Because I've seen personally myself how EVs are affected by wheel and tire choice. If you get the bigger wheels, they look cooler, but you're gonna pay for it with more energy consumption and shorter range. So those are the basics from the exterior. Let's see the interior of the car. Let's start actually from the back. So the trunk, you could see just how big this wheelbase is. Like it really does drive really well on the highway, with really stable. The door handles, of course, are popping open. And then right down here, there's a lot of beeps and boops. You're gonna hear that today in the video a lot. Really generous trunk area. And it has even a lower trunk area here, which is pretty deep, I think comparable to Model Y. So this car is based on an EV dedicated platform. GM calls it their BEV3 platform. So this Equinox shares nothing with the combustion engine Equinox. It's just a name, but it's a completely different car, which is good. That's usually how you get better packaging, more space, better efficiency. I'm not sure if the lowest base trims have the power trunk or not, but this one does. The seats fold down, you have like really a lot of space in this car. Let's move over to the driver's seat. So I'm 5'9", and I can, let me shut this off because it's making so many noises. There we go. So I'm 5'9". I fit really well into this car. I have lots of headroom above my head. The seats are very wide. I think many like bigger drivers, wider drivers are gonna fit into these seats really well. Not too much like seat bolstering on the sides, but it is a comfortable seat after a couple of hours of highway cruising, no problem. Usually I like to have my seat all the way down, but in this car I actually need to raise it slightly because the slope of this windshield kind of rakes forward pretty far, and also there's front visibility. Like I kind of want to see, especially where the corners are. This is one of the like first cars I've driven in a while where I have to raise my seat a little bit as a 5'9" guy. But we have a big chunky steering wheel. This is the RS steering wheel, really nice. Feels nice in the hand, good angle. So this is kind of my seating position here. Very comfortable for cruising. And then here in the back seat, there's very generous amount of space here as well. So I'm sitting behind myself now, and look at all this room I've got here. Maybe not so much headroom if I want to stretch all the way back here. For taller people, maybe they're gonna have to kind of like slouch a little bit. But honestly, this is very much comparable to like Model Y, maybe even slightly better. Like I feel like there's lots of space. I have two USB Type-C charging ports over here. Might be hard to see because everything here is black in this interior, but really comfortable for cruising. I love it. And while we're on the interior exterior tour, let's see under the trunk. No, the frunk. There's no frunk, the hood. It's a double pull. And yeah, I think this could be improved for sure. There's a lot of the orange is of course the high voltage cabling. We have fluids. This is the windshield washing fluids, but look at the amount of space in here between the radiator and whatever this is, the electronics. Like I think they could have packaged this better, cleaned this up a little bit more, just to potentially squeeze in a little frunk here. I did a video of this exact test for the Hyundai Kona a few weeks ago, and I complained there was no frunk there either, but actually a viewer pointed out to me later in the comments that there is a very slim frunk under a plastic cover in the Kona, so thank you, I missed that. And there's even like sound deadening material here, which is kind of like a carryover from combustion cars. I don't know why they might need this for an EV, because honestly, the motor in this car when you're cruising is like dead silent. Like highway cruising, city cruising, no complaints from the motor at all. Good regen braking. So yeah, that's been like the tour of the Chevy Equinox EV RS. Let's jump in and I'll show you some of the EV specific features and software. Welcome to the interior of the Chevy Equinox EV RS. It's a really attractive interior. There's a lot of black and like plastic, but I think this works. The seats are nice. There's good bolstering. It's like a mix of fabrics and leather. Good headrests. There's a lot of beeps and boops, of course. That said somebody was approaching the car from the rear. You're gonna get an alert, which is cool. But here we have, I think, a 12-inch driver information display. So if I hit the brake pedal, that turns on the car. So unlike some legacy car companies, there's no like on and off button or like engine start button. All you do is you press the brake and then everything kind of turns on. We have a very attractive, I think, a 12-inch driver information display. So this gives you things like speedometer and like your kilowatt consumption. So right now we're stationary. Let's turn on the air. So we might see an increase in consumption. I'm gonna just lower the fan speeds. We have also our kind of guessometer range, which changes based on how aggressively you drive. So at 72%, it says we have 373 kilometers of range. This has been like a recent trip we did. 172 kilometers. We were at mostly highway driving. We did 4.4 kilometers per watt hour. And this is a much longer trip. So this car is actually a Turo rental. So it's getting used and abused quite heavily. There's some damage. I'm sure it gets driven quite aggressively too. But even still, after a 15,000 kilometer trip number 2 here, we have 5.8 kilometers per kilowatt hour. So that gives you some indication of like long-term efficiency. So this is the driver information display, and of course I think the more impressive screen, and I think you get this with all trims now, is this big 17-inch infotainment screen. So this of course uses Google's kind of Google-based infotainment system, so this helps Chevy a lot with their software. But of course you have to have capable hardware to power the software, and I think everything here is really smooth and responsive to the touch. So we kind of have like a home menu with like things like drive modes, normal, sport. Honestly, like it sharpens up the throttle, but sport mode does not make this car much faster than it is, like I kind of complained earlier. There's of course things like Google Assistant, which is cool. So you can ask, basically the same Google Assistant you have on an Android phone. You could do the same types of queries here. You can even activate it with your steering wheel voice assistant button. So the voice commands here are answered by Google Assistant. So that's really cool. We have things like cameras, which is cool. I mentioned earlier that the visibility in front of the car could be a little bit challenging sometimes because of the way this windshield is kind of like really steep slope. There is luckily a front camera, or at least in this RS trim, so that actually helps you with parking. And then you could also do like overhead views, side views. I think the cameras here are the backup camera views. Really nice cameras. We even have ambient lighting, which is really nice at night. And because it's the Google kind of base system, we have both Waze and Google Maps. Usually I prefer Waze to Google Maps because of its community reports around you, so it can kind of show you like speed traps and things like that and traffic. However, in this car, I think if I was to drive it daily, I would use Google Maps just because it is better integrated into the car. It gives you, the Google Maps knows exactly how much energy you have in the car and your efficiency, and it's going to calculate your trips better. So for example, let's choose a nearby destination like Starbucks. This is a faraway Starbucks. You saw how quickly that was. It plans our trip. It shows 56% on arrival, 39% round trip. This is super useful to know. For example, if you're going to have to make a charging stop on your errands, or if you have enough battery leaving home to make the trip completely. If we were to choose a further away destination, like another city, it's going to show us minus 81. So it's good that it tells you that you don't have enough charge. And it planned 4 charging stops for us. So what did it choose? Petro-Canada, Coburg. So this, what is this? There's 2 CCS 350s at this Petro-Canada. I kind of wish there was more, but that's more of an infrastructure problem. But it does plan your charging pretty effectively, and it has basically pretty good route planning inside of Google Maps. So I wish there was maybe more customization. Oh, here we go. You could prefer your state of charge on arrival. With a bigger battery such as this, I think it's pretty safe to arrive with 10% on arrival. Now it's going to recalculate, and 12% after charging. So now we only need 3 charging stops. So this is really good. And Montreal at 12% state of charge. This doesn't include superchargers, just because at least here in Canada, there's no kind of like plug-in charge, especially for Chevy, and you have to use the Tesla app to find a supercharger station in your area that is open to non-Teslas. More and more are coming online. At least this version of the software does not recommend supercharger stops, because I think that would make this trip a lot easier. Another thing that I forgot to mention about supercharging stops is, again, the port placement in the front is on the driver left side. So normally on Teslas, supercharger stalls are designed with the port being in the driver rear side. So for us to angle our car to line up with a supercharger stall, we have to occupy 2 spaces. And yesterday we were at a semi-busy supercharger, occupying 2 spaces, parked in the middle. And people were certainly turning heads and maybe judging us, but it did work out, and I don't think we blocked anyone. There was nobody waiting for a spot. But it's something to keep in mind of, is that because of the short supercharger cables and the placement of this charge port, when you go there, you're going to have to occupy 2 spaces. But it's not a problem just for this car. It's a lot of other non-Tesla EVs, and hopefully with the V4 superchargers in the future, with longer cables, it's going to be less of a problem. So continuing with the software tour, I want to show you the charging specific menu of this car. So it's here on the home screen, and we do have fast charge prep. So this is cool because you can manually precondition the battery for optimal fast charging. We've used this to get to the supercharger yesterday, and it worked out beautifully. You press this button, let's say I don't know, 20 minutes before you arrive, and you're going to see increased energy consumption on your dashboard. Well, I've observed that. I think it uses something like 5-6 kilowatts of extra energy to heat the battery for a little while. But then when you arrive, you're going to hopefully hit that maximum peak of 150 kilowatts charging. And I think you can arrive at like 10, 20%, maybe even 30% and still hit that peak, which is nice. But I usually like to charge when the car is really low, just to take advantage of the maximum charge curve. So this works really well. We also have charging scheduling here, which is good. And what else? One thing that I think should be better for this car, and hopefully this is improved over time with software updates, is that for level 2 charging, you cannot control the amperage that goes into the car. Basically, whatever your charging station, your EVSE at your house provides, this car is going to take. There's no way to limit it to, let's say, 20 amps. I like to, personally, I don't like to run my equipment at full load for like hours at a time overnight. If I don't need the car to be charged in 3 hours overnight, then I'd like to kind of extend that charging to 6-8 hours, whatever. If I'm in a rush and I only have 2 hours to charge during the day, then of course I'll go full power. But I wish there was a way to limit level 2 charging. It does give you the option here for level 1 charging. You could do maximum 12 amps or 8 amps. I think this is more to do with some circuits are kind of more sensitive to loads, especially 120 volt circuits. So it gives you the option here. But for level 2, you're basically, some home charging stations give you the ability to reduce amps from the charger, but you don't have the ability to do that here. But overall, this is really good. Manual preconditioning. There's automatic preconditioning for fast charging when you navigate to a charging station. I think this is really well thought out. And over here, you'll notice that there are these kind of like hotkeys here. This is to power off your vehicle because there's no like physical off button. And there's also a really easy switch here for one pedal driving. I love this, just to have easy access, and this actually stays persistently in the car. It remembers the setting, unlike the Hyundais. So more on this in a bit. Under vehicle status, we have tire pressures, our trip information, and our energy consumption, like in real time. So it shows you where the energy went to. So like driving, we have climate, and we have what is this? Climate and fast charge prep. So pretty good information to have. You can also, for example, on my main screen here, on the driver screen, right now I have the speedometer, our media, and we have our trip information. But if I wanted to, come over here, I can add this to the driver display. So now I've included my kind of energy consumption widget on my driver display. And there's a lot of customization you could do here. Even on the main screen, you can basically have a widget here for tire pressures or your media. There's a lot of customization you can add here. You can edit these, and you can have like a map view on the split screen on this side. So that's really cool. I like to have this kind of immersive map experience here, and like basically my driver controls on the driver screen. But also, that's not all, because there is this button on the steering wheel here which toggles your driver display settings. So you could have kind of different designs for your, let me show you, for your driver information display. So you can have like a full map experience, which is cool, or you can have like cruise control settings, and this is just a more of a simplistic speedometer. This volume knob is cool too, because it's kind of part of the screen. This is cool because the knob is floating, but it moves the volume setting over here. The screens overall are very impressive, very sharp. The only downsides to these screens I've noticed is when you're driving at nighttime. The screens are either kind of too bright for the environment, or you can manually adjust the brightness with a knob here. But if I set the screen brightness to a more comfortable viewing brightness, I find that the darks, the blacks of this screen become washed out. So instead of black, you're seeing kind of gray. So it's maybe there's a bit of a contrast issue at nighttime for these screens. But that is like a very minor complaint to have. I think, I don't know how like this gradient, some people might love it, some people hate it. I think it's fine. Materials feel good enough. There are 2 USB Type-C charging ports here. There's wireless charging there. 2 cup holders. A kind of small-ish storage. Oh, it's pretty deep. It's just kind of narrow. And as a bonus, we do have additional storage here because there's no transmission tunnel with transmission going from the front to the back. You do have more storage over here. This car does not have the optional sunroof. I think even though this is the RS trim, you have to basically get an optional package for those niceties. I think this car is basically RS, but then very few options, if any. If I was gonna buy one, I would probably go for the LT trims, just because like to take maximum advantage of the affordability factor, because you get a big battery for like not a lot of money, and also you'll have more range and efficiency thanks to the 19-inch more optimized, more efficient wheels. But as a cruiser day to day, I think this is a nice car. Again, just the very minor complaints were even when you give it the maximum 500 amps, it still is not the fastest to charge, and it's not the most efficient EV. I think with our Model Y, we had with kind of similar charging input at a charging station, we were able to travel further. So in the video that I will link in this video, in our 10% test, charging from 10% for 15 minutes, this car traveled 140 kilometers after charging. We tested the Hyundai Kona, which is a much even slower charging car, smaller battery, but more efficient and lighter. But that car still managed 114 kilometers. And a Tesla Model Y, which has a smaller battery but charges faster and is more efficient, we were able to travel 160 kilometers after 15 minutes charging. So that kind of gives you a kind of rough placement where this kind of belongs in the market, but you cannot deny the affordability factor. This car in the LT trims in America can be had for something like mid to low 30s, and then you can add incentives on that, and then it's a really affordable, great car. In Canada, I think this usually the Canadian spec cars are the base trims are a little bit better equipped. For that reason, and because of our weak dollar, you're going to be paying in the high 40s for the base Chevy Equinox's EVs. And then if you get for the RS and all the other like all-wheel drive options, you can easily go 50s and 60s. But I would probably not go too crazy with optioning this car, because you're going to get much closer to like the price points of like Teslas and other competitors that are more expensive, that perhaps charge faster. But as it is, and if you don't go too crazy with options, this could be a really good deal. I really enjoy driving this car. So yeah, that's been the interior tour of the Chevy Equinox EV. Let's go for a drive and get some impressions. So this car has 20,000 kilometers on it. Here's a roundabout. And I think it had a pretty rough life as a rental car for the first 20,000 kilometers. There's only, I think, one rattle I hear somewhere in here, but I think otherwise it's put together pretty well. We're going over some pretty rough roads with like potholes and manhole covers, and I think it is pretty well dampened. Like, it's not too aggressive. There is a little bit of suspension noise coming through when I hit the bigger bumps, but it is still acceptable considering we're on 21-inch wheels. The ride is good. I think it'll be even better if you opt for the 19s. Again, very little motor noise. I was complaining that the front wheel drive 200 horsepower version is not really peppy enough, like for around town driving like this. I think it's still plenty, but on the highway, I think we're gonna jump on the highway in a bit. You'll see that it's really not doing all that much for us. Really smooth regen braking. So on the dash here, I have the power goes into green when I'm regenning, and then it goes blue when I'm accelerating. Really clear instruments. Right now I'm in one pedal driving, and once you get used to EV driving and one pedal driving, I think you don't go back. I don't know anyone who has tried one pedal driving and then went back to conventional creeping automatic transmission feel. Here on this car, very easy. There's a button right there on your quick controls, and right now, see, I let go off the brake and we're creeping forward. So if you're still new to EVs, or you do prefer the automatic transmission feel, you can do that. Or I'm gonna switch it back. It's gonna hold us at this traffic light. We're gonna go left. Again, impressions. This car drives pretty well. So under drive mode customization, we have some options for steering feel. So normal, which is kind of light, or if I switch to sport, it's supposed to be a little bit kind of heavier. I think the steering is a little bit vague either way. It's like I don't feel like it's really, it's still very light in both settings. For brake feel, we also have customization for normal and sport modes. So maybe a bit more aggressive braking versus a bit more gentle. Acceleration feel, honestly, like, it doesn't give you more power, it just sharpens up the throttle response a little bit. And motor sound, I have it as off, but like, give us some space, and can you hear this? Oh, there was a little bit of torque steer. I gave it like full beans at like 20 kilometers an hour, and that actually pulled us ever so slightly to the left. So that's kind of the typical front wheel drive behavior. It is exhibited here as well. But maybe you picked up that little bit of motor sound as we were accelerating. It kind of sounds like a spaceship, or maybe that's how they want you to feel. But I'm gonna switch that off for the remainder of the drive. But on these types of roads, yeah, the car is very quiet, very smooth. Not too much noise, not too much wind noise. The ride is good, like I said, despite the 21-inch wheels. And yeah, nothing much to complain about. It's a really normal driving experience. When you get into like a Tesla, like for the first time, there is a learning curve. But this, if you were to get this as a rental car, or if you wanted like a more normal driving experience, this is probably the car for you. If you want an EV with lots of range, with really traditional button layouts, traditional vents, traditional stalks, buttons on your steering wheel, like this, a really normal car that doesn't burn gas. So what's not much to complain about. Really smooth regen braking down to a stop, and then it just kind of grabs the friction brakes at the last moment, and there's not much head movement, really well controlled. This car is amazing for covering long distance on the highway. It's really smooth. Like I said before, it's got a really long wheelbase and quite large wheels, not even just the rims, but the diameter of the entire wheel is very big. So that gives you more stability, and this car drives really straight. There was a Cybertruck. I think on the highway is where you kind of see that lack of power I was talking about earlier. So now we're going 100 kilometers an hour, and then if I put my foot down, it takes about 3 seconds or so to get to 120, which is like a more optimal cruising speed on the highway around here. And then even beyond that, there is even less pull. So it feels just a little bit gutless at those kind of highway cruising speeds. I mean, it'll get to speed just fine, but highway overtaking, or if you need to accelerate to squeeze in and find a gap in another lane, that might be a problem. I mean, it's not a problem. Like, we're just so used to having such powerful electric cars that a 200 horsepower or so front wheel drive SUV, especially one of this weight, feels just a little bit underwhelming. There's more than enough power for finding gaps on city roads, but on the highway for overtaking, I think maybe you do want the dual motor all-wheel drive. I think I complained about the low voltage architecture in the beginning, and in some cases, yes, it could be a problem. So I took this car to a 50 kilowatt DC fast charger, and because of the lower voltage, I think the charger was limited to 125 amps. So I think at 20%, I was getting maybe 34, 35 kilowatts. Again, it's those amps multiplied by the low voltage of the battery pack. So then there you go. Like, it's only 3 times faster than AC charging. Speaking of AC charging, there is an excellent 11 kilowatt, 48 amp onboard AC charger. So most of the time, like most people, if you're going to be charging at home, this is not an issue at all. You're going to get your full charge overnight, or even like a little burst during the daytime if you need. No problem. Then I took it to a 150 kilowatt charging station, again, which I think was limited to 300 amps or so. And that's where I saw another problem where I could only get about 100 or just about under 100 kilowatts from that station. It's not bad, like it's fine, it'll do, but it's not like the full power you were promised by that charging station. So if you show up with an Equinox to a 150 kilowatt charging station and you're only getting 100, you'll know why. It's not the fault of the charging station necessarily. It's just those low amperage limits. But then I took it to a 250 kilowatt V3 Tesla Supercharger, and that's where it really worked out really well for me, because though this car needs 500 amps in order to hit that 150 kilowatt peak, and superchargers are happy to give you like 600 or even more amps during the charging session. So no problem. We hit 150 kilowatts, I think 152 even, no problem. And the curve was actually really steady. So it wasn't until like 36%, I want to say, that we came off the peak into like the 120s kilowatts. And so for that reason, in like a 15-minute charging session, we gained something like 34 kilowatt hours was delivered. and with some losses, let's say there was like 31 kilowatt hours was put into the pack. So not too bad. If you can give it the amps, 500 amps from low down, this car will charge decently for highway road tripping. And again, with that initial 85 kilowatt hour capacity battery, at the price you're getting this car, it's a really capable highway cruiser. Maybe not the best, but honestly, like if you spec this car, the way I would spec this car is in the LT trim, perhaps, just to keep the cost down. And I would get the all-wheel drive just for the added performance. Get the 19-inch narrower wheels that are better for aero as well. And you're looking at a very capable long-distance driver. So those are kind of my thoughts on the Chevy Equinox EV. I've really enjoyed my time with it. I could really see how Chevy is going to be taking away sales from Tesla with this car that is in some ways better, some ways worse, but also considerably less expensive. So yeah, that's been my thought on the Chevy Equinox EV. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.